Wait, do you see also my, this here. Yes, thank you so much for the invitation and joining for this early morning. So my name is Zeynep Falay Von Flittner, and I will, before I introduce myself, I was thinking it would be nice to see who is in the audience. And I wonder if you want to take a minute to write some keywords about what's present with you and who you are or what you want to share. It's just a couple of keywords and we can see how do we feel today. So either you can go to menti.com and enter this passcode, or see if you can use the QR code to enter the survey. Oops. Let's see, hopefully. Does it work? Okay. Okay, we started to see some responses. People, curious-minded people interested, of course, circular design, but also service design, some funding. Imagination, futures, some master thesis students and transitions researchers. So maybe you don't need to, you know already, it sounds like experienced group. Mom, sports, I love we have all different identities, and it's really interesting to see how we are showing up in different environments. It doesn't have to be always the content of our professional identity, but maybe some familiar names also here. Happy to see. Okay, looks like we had a little bit, almost all the answers in. And then I will switch to my introduction now. Yes, so quick, for some of you who has been listening to my past talks, this might be a bit repetitive, but it's always nice to a little bit explain where I'm coming from, because I spent a long time in design industry. The first 10 years was more on the digital transformation side, working with Nokia, mobile marketing years ago. And then with Fjord, I was working with Fjord Accenture many years, building digital services for clients. Then I joined to Hellon and shifted actually from digital to holistic service design, and customer centricity transformation became the topic between 2015 to 2021, and helping clients to become more customer centric many years. And then I got introduced actually in 2017, transition design, and I got very, very passionate about it, because the fact that design has some value to add for societal transformation was very exciting for me. So I started to push that field, and of course, sustainability became a bigger topic and concern. So I started to look for opening up this design for sustainability field in the practice. But then in 2021, also about the same time, I actually joined System Change Finland and started to get familiar with systems thinking methodologies, and merged down with human-centric design and futures thinking, and started to get really interested in this new possibilities that we can bring to the field for sustainability transitions. And in 2021, I took a leap of faith and started to work as an entrepreneur. And that was not because I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. That didn't come from a entrepreneurial spirit, but more of a urgency that I felt that we need to push things a little bit faster, and also we need actors who can talk a bit more about radical transformation in the practice as well. There's a lot of work in the theory space, but not many practitioners in the field, and businesses can actually go beyond the usual incremental change. And that's why I joined. Also, I was initiating this design activist for regenerative futures a couple of years ago, which is again LinkedIn community and Slack community of designers, a little bit trying to think and create alliances with each other. There's a lot of international participation there. And currently I'm also sitting in Puistakota 4 and look for, again, collaborations between science and creative practices for ecological sustainability and transformations. And Falay Transition Design is the community that merged during this entrepreneurial journey, where we start to collect this very like-minded people. A lot of graduates from Aalto's creative sustainability team started to come closer to me and wanted to work in a new way. So we have an experiment going on to build a future of regenerative business, design business model. We work in an entrepreneurial spirit in order to not to create this business as usual financial pressure, but everybody in the network is somehow accountable of their own financial well-being. Yet we work in a community of care, and we are taking care of each other, basically, to build a sustainable employment environment for each other, let's say. And we have systems thinkers as well as artists and sustainability experts and designers. And we are trying to position our work a bit against the business as usual. And then proactively we come up with different projects that are in line with our theory of change, and we try to find new funding mechanisms instead of just following the market and the current budget holders in the market to meet their needs, because the traditional design business reinforces the existing systems continuously. So this is an attempt to a bit disrupt and create a pull from the future. And we are this amount of people right now. Some of them work more closely as a tight community. Some of them are more in advisory capacity. But it's, again, follow us in falaydesign.com, in LinkedIn, in Instagram, and we are sharing everything. We are learning. So that's one of our missions as well, that, okay, how can we actually shift from this more competitive to this more collaborative, open, transparent work culture, to build on each other's thinking and accelerate transitions. And this is one of our actually advisors, İdil Gazi Ulusoy, and her co-writer Chen Xin. They had this multi-level innovation framework looking at this how design is moving towards more socio-technical system level. And I feel this is a very important framework for us and our thinking as well, because as you see, a bit similar to my personal design career, in this framework, we can see this levels of design interventions. And it starts from this more product level and component level to improve this quality materials, but then shifting towards a product service system level on this more UX side. And then, but then the need is to move towards the spatial, social, and socio-technical system level interventions to create a bigger impact. On the other hand, when we move to the upper part, the scope of the design interventions shifts from this more insular and silo projects towards more systemic projects, which is very difficult to, of course, coordinate, fund, create ownership. But also the framing of the design problems are shifting from this more technocentric problems towards more human-centric and cultural and about more mindset shift and behavior related problems. So in a way, I see that maybe currently, again, I would love to hear from the community also feedback, and please write in the messages if you have any comments. But this currently, a lot of circular design efforts are still focusing on this product and product service system level spaces, and then maybe transition design is trying to push now to the higher level, and it's quite difficult to bring a lot of practical examples. So we are also learning by doing. So it's not exactly has a long track record, let's say, in practice. But this is nothing new, but we know that we're in a very critical time, and the extent to which current and future generations will experience the impacts of the climate depends on the choices now and in the near term. So I'm trying to build also a lot of urgency and shift a little bit from this stuckness in the business as usual and limitations of the existing institutional barriers, and how can we actually build this new initiatives, new experiments, new actors in the field that accelerate things in a new way, because basically this is the time to do that, and if we don't do it, things are getting worse for sure. And we also know that the biggest source of planetary boundary stress today is excessive resource consumption by roughly the wealthiest 10% of the world's population, and the production patterns of the companies producing the goods and services that they buy. So a lot of the efforts, employment work in Finland is in this target group. There is a lot of agency, a lot of impact, especially for this non-urgent or this consumption that is actually fueling the economic growth right now, but not maybe exactly necessity. That's the area we need to intervene and maybe move. Of course, circular solutions are very important for reducing the negative impact, but also we need to push more radical change for more regenerative and healing systems, and how businesses can be part of it. Because until now, and I feel that very strongly in my life and in my heart, that this 20 years of my career where I worked with very smart clients, very good intentions, very kind of good agenda, we didn't see the unintended negative consequences of the business world that we are creating, like all this digital transformation. We've been an active actor in Finland. We didn't see the current social fabric issues around addiction for the next generation. We maybe wasn't that much in the marketing branding field were concerned about the impact on environment in the last 20 years. So there needs to be this type of reflection and willingness to improve our capabilities to understand the complexity and address and build the capabilities to kind of deal with this unintended negative consequences better towards the future, especially when there's now all this AI solutions coming up. It's more than important that we get better at this. And of course, this that these wicked problems, when we think of the societal problems, they are all systemic, interlinked, embedded within each other, and they cannot be addressed in isolation. And this vitality is produced by multiple processes in very contextual interaction. And yet we are living in a world which is governed by silo organizations, expert on one thing, and also with governance with short-term KPIs, pressures mainly in maximizing efficiency, profit, and growth, as well as this domination with technocentric worldview and reductionist linear mindset, makes it very difficult to address the systemic problems in new ways. Also, there's a lot of invisible data that we need to start understanding, concretizing, visualizing, and making available for many actors to start working in this in-between spaces. And Nora Bateson, if you don't know her, definitely check her out. She has this Warm Data Labs, and I would like to, she's trying to create a language around this invisible data. And I would like to read this quote for you. So, living systems, like a jungle, is not an isolated thing, but instead exist in the interrelationship between soil, foliage, animals, weather patterns, bacteria, and so on. Approaching topics without an understanding of this holism of the systems will create short circuits in the complexity and countless unintended consequences. So we need to understand these holism of the systems and also this interrelationality, interconnectedness. So we need to build new capacities to address not only improving things one thing at a time without understanding its effects, but somehow this resources needs to be channeled to this more systemic way of understanding and building these new improvements. And it's very important that circular economy field has actually interest, because there's a risk that while we think we are fixing something, we are all the time building these externalities. So I feel that strongly that we need radical transformation in the way we work in order to address these wicked problems and accelerate the needed sustainable transitions. And I'm now trying to be one of those radical actors, more independently exploring these things. But then again, we also need to build alliances with actors who are closer to this more traditional institutions, traditional companies, and work in this new ways, like how these external actors and the internal actors can empower each other and learn from each other and work in new ways to bring our strengths together. Because every institution, it can be private, public sector, academia, you name it, or entrepreneurs, have certain strengths and freedom spaces, but also clear limitations that comes from that fundamental structures of their institutions. So how can we go over that for the next 5-10 years is my passion right now. And let's talk a little bit about what is transitions. I'm talking quite fast, but we have a lot of material, and then hopefully we can have some dialogue as well. But transitions are highly complex, dynamic, and long-term processes. They touch a very large stakeholder base and challenge power structures and replace institutions. And they are definitely underlined by uncertainty, and they touch the social, economic, technological, governance challenges. So when we think about this shift from the horse carriage to automobile, like this kind of current car industry, it took a lot of time. And even though it was triggered by a technological innovation per se, it has changed a lot of things in the society. How, for example, these road infrastructures have been established, how the urban spaces and the understanding of our good life living system changed with it. We had to invent a lot of rules around traffic rules, how to be this human machine in the same public places together. And a lot of new type of institution emerged to coordinate and regulate the system. So again, if we think about the introduction AI, autonomous robots, we will go through a similar kind of process in the future, and of course in a much, much shorter time than in the past transitions. So how can we build capacity to understand all this complexity and be more intentional in these transitions rather than just falling into wherever time takes us? And usually in that process, a lot of vulnerable groups gets hurt a lot. And this is again, very good framework from Berkane Institute. We've been a bit editing, like Dirk Loorbach from Netherlands is working a lot in this transition space. But basically, this is a small snapshot of when there's enough pressure on the dominant system, when there's enough understanding that the systems are not sustainable anymore, not serving us anymore, it starts to go down. And we are in the time that this is happening. We know this, a lot of signals are telling us the current systems are not sufficient anymore. But we also don't want the systems to collapse, because then it's chaos and there's much more harm. So we need stabilizers who are actually keeping the old system in place while the new system is emerging. But in that emergence, we need actors, pioneers who are creating these niche innovations, niche models, and networks that starts to do things in a new way. This next paradigm actors needs to emerge, and they need to be supported, protected, and in order to support this change. And then once this proof of concept of this new paradigm start to gain bigger weight and validation, then we start to move to this more community of practice, and the emergent system starts to become slowly the dominant way of being. And another very key actor in there is these transition, these hospice workers. How are we phasing out the elements of the current dominant system that will need to be, hospiced and let go? And how can we be there actively, honoring maybe the old paradigm actors who also in their time did their best, but still find a way that they don't resist anymore the change of the new ways of being. So this kind of, in our work, we do a lot of this hospice design and a little bit exploration in this kind of rituals of, phasing out things and letting things go. So transition design is actually a transdisciplinary approach. It's built on different methods of theories of change from multiple fields. For example, systems thinking, of course, systems innovation, sustainability science, anthropology, design research, futures, transition management, regenerative leadership. So it's just not like it's one field, but it's the combination. But because it's also transdisciplinary, it offers this processes of collaborations between very different actors in a systemic way. So that's, I think, very important that we keep bringing these different types of knowledges together to work on the same topics. And for example, the Puisakatu that I'm part of is actually an experiment in that way that is quite interesting, how to bring very different academic fields as well as these NGOs and activists and business actors together into the same space. One aspect of transition design that I find very inspiring from my perspective is that there's a active hope, as Joanna Macy's puts it. So we believe that we can intentionally seed and catalyze transitions towards more sustainable futures. So there is a fundamental kind of posture of an active, not a naive optimism that things will be better, but an active hope and proactive stand that we can do things right now in order to steer things towards more desirable future direction. And that's the kind of root cause of this whole activity and effort. And this is a very kind of high-level design process, transition design process, and key elements that I like to introduce. So we have a lot of methods coming from systems thinking to understand the current problems in a more systemic way. So really going to the deep roots of things and mapping things and understanding with this multi-stakeholder perspective. Because I think in the old paradigm of industrialization, we've been understanding things from this very kind of smaller perspective. And of course, all the assessment was done from this maybe more growth agenda and more exploitative point of view. And now how can we actually understand the systems better, and also the past transitions, how we ended up today from the systemic point of view, and what lead to what, and that kind of things we are exploring. Then another part is about futures, and here we take from one, not exactly maybe a foresight, but more a normative futures standpoint. How can we envision radically different but desirable futures? And we bring there a lot of creative tools, creative practices to trigger imagination, and we do a lot of imagination activism of start building this craving for a totally different system and start concretizing and visualizing those things. And the third key pillar is this transition pathways, like how do we come from this today's system, today's knowledge, to this radically different far futures. And there are a lot of methods, again, building this transition pathways, and also spotting interventions that we can do today to learn, observe and learn in order to build new capacity, but also possibilities for this future paradigm. And now there's a couple of maybe elements, like there's, of course, it's a political also part that brings a lot of different stakeholders, but also I think this challenging mental models and going deeper into the values and kind of our assumptions and beliefs that keeps this current systems in place, and intervening there to imagine the next potential systems and paradigms. And here, big name is, of course, Donella Meadows and her leverage point frameworks, and basically trying to find these, like she has this framework where she's addressing different places to intervene in a system. And you can, of course, these parameters like more numbers and materials, those are very common interventions right now that, you know, a lot of companies trying to do. But of course, more further we go, the impact is larger. So if you can intervene in the goal of a system or mindset and paradigm level, or in the power structures, there's a much bigger shift for the system. So that's where, again, this transition design is maybe exploring more, whereas maybe many of this current closer to the business world is a little bit still in the shallower leverage point interventions. And imagination of this radically different futures, I mentioned, that's a big part of it. And we know that there's like different forces of the future. This is, again, a very nice framework from Inyatullah. But the future is affected by three forces, according to him. One is this weight of the history. Of course, we need to understand better the lock-ins and how the history played out and why, and what are the kind of consequences we are living today, and what are the things we need to consider. But also the push of the presence. There's a lot of weak signals, a lot of niche actors trying to do and come together in new ways at the moment, kind of showing the direction of the force towards the future. But we need to this very maybe missing pieces, this transformative scenarios and this pull of the future. Where do we want to go? What would be a desirable system that we want to shift? And that's not very clear right now in the industry, we have a lot of data of what's going wrong, but then what would be a desirable system that, we would address those wicked problems? That part needs a lot of still support and work to be done. And then selecting and designing interventions is, of course, a big thing, and actually experimenting with that. For example, transition town movements, when they are creating these micro space-based also systems with its own rules, let's say, own energy sufficient systems, food systems, even their currency, brings a lot of evidence and insight about what's another paradigm could look like. So we need to make, of course, that kind of experiments, but also maybe there are other things that companies can do today for this more future interventions. So at Falay Transition Design, we have actually an open source transition design toolbox. We've been using our design skills to develop a lot of canvases and ways to facilitate these discussions. And you can access it either from the website, you can order it basically, or you can of course reach me to learn more. Okay, one case, I wanted to finish with one concrete case. We did this transition design sprint for VTT, and somehow like these things can be, we are sometimes doing as a short series of workshops, a bit similar to this design thinking methods, but sometimes of course needs to span in a longer time and bring in multiple actors thinking together and doing a lot of imagination. So usually in the first day or first part, we do this deep dive into the current system knowledge, going through these methods to map why we are here. And rarely, and also we have games like, this transition pathway from the past to the present. And multidisciplinary teams are trying to map this deep understanding how we ended up here. And then we foster those with playful methods like, okay, what would you change in the history? An event that would change what would happen today. And this type of creative exercises, again, builds our capacity to understand transitions better with the data of the past. And then in the second part, we have a lot of design games and, as I mentioned, creative tools to actually tell the story. We write fiction of another paradigm. How would it look like? How could it feel like? There's many methods from futures and imagination that actually triggers this sensations of immersing yourself to a totally different way of setup and being. And of course doing this also with involving this multi-stakeholders, more than human stakeholders, beyond this usual stakeholders that businesses are actually currently investing, is very, very important and eye-opening. And in the last part, we use this kind of double flow, which is kind of combining this backcasting and forecasting to find these transition pathways and interventions, because there's a reality gap. If you go from the today to the future, you don't end up in this radical space. And then when you come back from this normative scenarios backwards, it's quite hard to end up in where we are. So this is a framework, again, developed by Idigazi Ulusoy, and we are trying to implement this practice and hold these conversations to see if we can create new connections. But thank you